Mike, are you gooing somebody behind my back? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Today we are talking about Season 6, Episode 4, Behind Enemy Lines, or just behind the lines. I keep putting that as enemy in my head, but you know what? That's because that's kind of how we feel like in real life right now. But excited to talk about this episode. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, Keith. I have some housekeeping before we jump in.
Oh, do tell.
So a few things. Number one, just because of the setup of the new space, the camera is going to be at like a 35-degree angle for me. So I have to like readjust to how and where I'm looking. So if it looks like I'm more distracted than usual, that's actually not the case. I'm just looking at a different place, Keith, because your lovely face is way over here on my screen, my big screen. Okay, that's number one. That's
well, to be fair, actually. So here's my eye line right here. You are here. So I've been faking it the entire time.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know.
Because I have to have my script dead ahead.
Yeah.
So I have you off to the side. So I'm only looking at you and then myself to check my hair so I look pretty for everybody.
Yeah, we talked earlier about how I got like a spider bite under my eye. It hurts bad.
Oh no.
Anyway, sorry. That is not any of the housekeeping I wanted to talk about. Number one, I wanted to say thank you to JD, who sent me my first parcel here at the new house, Keith.
Oh, how exciting.
I have no idea what is in this, but I'm sure we will find out together, live, as we always do, on Look at My Star Trek Toys, which you can check out on this very here YouTube channel.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of stuff.
Awesome. The other thing I wanted to say is, Keith, last week, you very sincerely had said that, you know, if you're going through it right now due to politics, due to life, due to whatever, and you want to reach out to us and you're a patron or not even a patron, please do. And not a small number of you did just that.
Yeah.
We've tried to reach out to everybody who's written to us, and some of you are going through it. And I'm not going to share anybody's business, but I just wanted to say that though Keith and I guess, I don't know how to say this exactly. I guess our because of all of our lives are tangential through the internet. And I know that a lot of people, the podcasts I listen to, I feel like I'm friends with these people. I know these people, and I don't have a direct dialogue with them. Though we can't be in everybody's life, we are thinking about you. We're sending you our best, and I sincerely mean it. Like from the bottom of our hearts, we are sending you every good juju we have.
Yeah.
I can speak for myself, Keith. I'm also going through it. Stress, life, the whole thing, the whole big picture. And as Keith really succinctly said last week, we're going to get through it together. So thanks for reaching out. Feel free to this is a safe space. Feel free to keep reaching out to us. And I just wanted to say it touched me. It was really special to hear from all of you.
100%. And, and it's been great. We've been hearing from the patrons on patreon.com/KNM, but you can also just email us.
Yeah.
At keithandmikeentertainment@gmail.com, or look at my Star Trek toys at gmail.com. I check Star Trek toys. He checks Keith and Mike Entertainment, although sometimes I accidentally check it and begin whole conversations there. But yeah, I mean, look, this is...
Yeah, and we're available on the social medias. You can find us. Just,
Yeah. I don't check my personal ones very often, but I try to check the us as often as possible. But yeah, look, this is we're heading into a complicated time, and it's going to be tough for kind of everybody, but for a lot of people in particular. So there's not a lot we can do other than commiserate, right? Yeah. But we're happy to do that, and we'll try to help in any way that we can. I'm feeling it too. I think we're all feeling it.
Feeling it.
Anyway, let us talk about last week's episode that I think, based on the comments that we got, sons and daughters, I think perhaps my own mood coming out of where the world was, I was maybe a little hard on the episode. So let's hear what you all had to say about it. So first off, Joshua Cronin says, "Hey Mike, glad you moved into your new place. Hope you have many wonderful memories there." Now, Mike hasn't moved his stuff yet, just his toys.
December 2nd. December 2nd is the official move date, but I'm basically in.
Meaning your computer and your TV is hooked up. You don't have a bed. You don't have a dining room table.
That's exactly
You don't
what
have
I
a
mean.
couch. None of those things.
Yeah,
Your TV and your computer. That sounds exactly right. Joshua continues, "Keith, the things you say, the things you guys believe and say mean so much to many communities. In this time of unknown, thanks for being there and thanks for putting a smile on my face. Big hugs to you both." It sort of dovetails on what we were saying before. Hey, you know what? That means a lot to me. We care deeply about everybody in this world, but specifically and especially the communities under threat. And I really appreciate you saying that. That makes me feel great.
Yeah, a little peek behind the curtains. Obviously, we wear our hearts on our sleeves and we talk about things that are outside of the scope of the shows we do. I think that's always been the case. But because of our sort of privileged position as sort of cis white males, sometimes we feel a little, I don't want to say sheepish, but like...
bashful?
Just about like showing support or saying that we feel any sort of way, because that can be juxtaposed with, oh, well, it's easy for you to say.
Trying not to feel like it's freaking performative or something, yeah.
So we appreciate that you guys can respect that it's not. And look, if you have a completely different opinion, as we've heard from some friends, like we said, it's a safe space to say your piece, but if you are remotely disrespectful to anybody in our community, you get the swift boot.
Yeah, 100%. It is safe for everything other than being unkind or unsafe to anybody.
Yeah.
Safe goes both ways.
Yeah.
Anyway, Joshua continues, "You are still the only podcast I listen to weekly. I'm not a podcast type of guy, but I always love to hear what your thoughts are on the episode. So this episode, meaning Sons and Daughters, is interesting. Not a zinger by any means, but here's my take. I like Ciel, but I truly think the character was created to show different sides of Ducat. So I think they do an okay job of blending her in with the storylines. For Alexander, well, I think Next Generation didn't know what to do, so they just left it. Deep Space Nine writers are great mopper-uppers and like to finish things, 100%. Like we see in so many episodes, someone said, hey, let's finish this story. So I take this episode with a grain of salt. It's in the middle of this 6-episode arc. Not the best, but I watch it and enjoy it. I give it 80 self-sealing stem bolts. Brian from Video Game Drive-By says, welcome back, guys. I'm right there with y'all in your feelings regarding national political news. We will make it through this next 4 years. The only way out is through, and the best way through is together. Yeah, indeed. I wanted to share something positive to help light up the dark that's trying to creep in everywhere. Thank you. I proposed!
Yay!
I got a member of her favorite band to make a cameo for me. She said yes. Fantastic. You know what? We're thrilled for you both. Congratulations, and thank you for something positive.
That's awesome. Congrats.
I can freaking use that.
If I'm not mistaken, Keith, he goes on.
Yes, I wanted to thank y'all for giving me the idea for the cameo with your Andrew Robinson clip from a bit back. Amazing.
I believe he continues as well.
Yes, y'all are totally invited. No pressure, though. That would be awesome. We can definitely cameo in for free.
I'm not going to say no. You send me an invite, and we'll see if I can get there.
I don't take invitations up to my living room, but...
Well, we just went to a wedding this past weekend and had the time of our lives. So my wife and I are great wedding dates. So CEO Jen and I...
That is true.
Yeah, and if I can get Keith out of his house, that's step one, and then we can get
Very
him over
unlikely.
to the, yeah.
Very
Where
unlikely,
are you
but
getting married? I guess we should start there.
But I'm a million times there in spirit.
Or we could just send a cameo. That's pretty fun.
We could definitely do that. So seeing Alexander come into his own as a goof among the warriors, yet still respected and loved by the end, is something I felt on a personal level growing up. Yeah, I hear that. Oh, sorry, I skipped a paragraph. Now, sons and daughters, particularly Alexander, I've always identified with him. I have a complicated relationship with my own father, who doesn't, and I kind of grew up torn between my own wants and trying to figure expectations. Yes, so seeing him become a goof among the warriors, yeah, totally get that. And I love how Martok immediately lays into Worf about his son. Martok is totally the best Klingon dad. Yeah, like Martok is like the Klingon dad for the entire species, I think.
Well, I'll say from my perspective, you know what? It's much easier being a parental figure when they're not your children. When there's no when the stakes are different, it's easier.
100%. When they go home at the end of the night to someplace that's not you. Yeah. On the station, the complex relationship between Ziyal, Kira, and Dukat is a fascinating watch. Everyone brings their best to the screen, and you just want Ziyal to be happy no matter what. Also, in our candy corner, coconut is awesome in chocolate. Almond Joy is life.
Okay. Hey, everybody's opinion is welcome.
As I found out, look,
your opinion is welcome.
The bars that confirmed my allergy to coconut were delicious for a while. Oof. So, Kalana Dakmar has a lot to say, as always, and says this, those coming to this near the end of Keith and Mike's React Deep Space Nine review, we're not quite at the end, we're only in season 6, but I hear you. And you want to, want to binge with the actual actors of Nog and Jake, writers, and other Deep Space Nine actors joined to review the comment, go to the 7th Rule, which is another fantastic podcast. Definitely go check it out.
When you're finished with this trash,
that's right. Go find out from the actual actors in all caps, coming in hot. But yes, and you can on that comment. There's a link to a.
Better yet, go to their pod and tell them you want us on the show.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
And they'll be like, "I'm sorry, what?"
And they continue, as for Keith shiting on Ziyal's paintings. Again, glad you guys aren't the writers or production designers. That style represented a fictional, impressionistic, avant-garde minimalism using watercolor washes and styled coloring, i.e., like Chinese and Japanese.
I do want to take this opportunity because I feel that I feel like we were in a mood. I feel like I should have defended more because I didn't feel as strongly as you do with the stick figures. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a completely fine representation of like impressionistic work that she was getting into, and you really had a strong feeling, so I kind of went with it. But I should have kicked back more.
Well, fair. I mean, look, art criticism is entirely subjective. I'm not like Wayun with no aesthetics. I have a great deal of aesthetic opinions. I'm an artist myself. So we're all entitled to whether or not we think they're beautiful art or stick figures. But all entirely fair. And yes, I'm perfectly aware of all of those artistic styles. I just didn't think this was a good representation of it. But also, on the other hand, we're seeing it over the shoulder on a upscaled standard definition film from 35 years ago. That's so true. Everybody can.
Have you noticed, Keith, the upscale this season is bad?
It's bad. No, it's not good.
Yeah.
Not good. Anyway, so Harry Pothead says, I'm so desperate to ignore reality that I've been watching MASH. It's a hell of a show. It's not particularly less dark.
No.
It is.
Although, sorry. Harry Pothead, we're coming right back to you. But I also decided I wanted to revisit something which I thought would be free of my feelings, but that I remembered so well from my childhood and forgot that had been... So, for years, you couldn't watch the DVDs of the Wonder Years, they didn't release them because of getting the music rights to all the 60s music was just an impossibility. Right. But recently, they're now all available. And so I wanted to go back to the pilot and
Did they replace all the music with generic music? Like
no, it's
WWE
all the
does?
original tracks.
Oh, they did it?
Yeah, they got it. So ABC did. And so I wanted to go, or it's on Disney Plus, so Disney has all of the monies, so it's fine. Sure. Anyway, number one, holy crap, that pilot, the Wonder Years pilot, is the perfect pilot. It is the best pilot. It is so good, and it has made me decide that, yes, I'm going to rewatch the Wonder Years. And find a show that you used to mean a lot to you or something special, and find a way to, like they said, the only way out is through. And man, that show puts you through it, because let me tell you, folks, I was Kevin Arnold. The 80s might have been sort of the last innocent suburb generation where you could sort of ride wherever you wanted on your bike and do your own thing. And that's why it paralleled so much. It sort of started in the early 60s and went through the 80s. I don't know that it exists anymore. Maybe that's why I connect with the show so much.
Yeah, well, it is the outside world, like, was a much smaller picture of our daily lives. I mean, with technology, with the internet, with cell phones, with communication. I mean, we were sent out. We didn't have phones.
Right.
They had to just trust that we came back, and whether or not it was actually safer or we just were unaware of the dangers. We just sort of like, do your thing. All right. Anyway. So Kevin Miles says...
Did we finish Harry Pothead's comment?
Yeah, that was it. Just watching MASH now.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Kevin Miles says, I'm writing this review while watching the review. You're in good company that way. We get a lot of great stream of consciousness comments. Your comments on Kira's behavior is interesting. Kira is playing nice for a couple of reasons. First, out of respect for Zial, Kira loves Zial and doesn't want to upset her. Secondly, she is forming a resistance cell and doesn't want to cause any suspicion. I think you're absolutely right. The part of that I have a hard time with in that episode is the storytelling and the direction is clearly trying to tell us that Kira isn't playing the role. She's actually catching herself being caught up in those things. At least from the performance and the direction that I can tell. Because I like your version much better than what it seems like we're getting in the episode. Kevin continues, As for Zial, she has love for both her father and Kira and is wearing blinders. She can't see the truth yet. A lot of interesting comments on that, which I think are very good comments. Yeah,
I mean, when I read this comment, I sort of reframed. Now, I firmly agree with what we decided, Keith, was that it's really not my job to assume what it should be, right? So it didn't read right. But
Mike, I have bad news.
What?
We don't actually have a job.
You're right. Yeah, well, I guess literally this is a job. We are being paid.
I guess technically yes.
So, you often see like divorced parents who can't stand each other, right? But the kid so desperately wants them to get back together that the kid puts something when they come to the birthday party. The kid ignores the BS because mom and dad are together and they tried, so I could see that from her. But she is like 30.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the thrust of the comments is having some empathy for the difficult position that she's been in, and the limited nature of her interaction with other people, spending all of that time at a labor camp. Like, I totally get that. And I think if the analogy were like the parents were divorced and she's trying to like her dad, who's like kind of a jerk and steals cable, but like this dude's like, he's like a war criminal. Like, I think there's like a magnitude difference in...
I mean, it's all changed for me after that first comment, because if you look at Zial exclusively as a lens with which to view a different refraction of Dukat, it works a lot better for me.
Well, which is the... and I think a couple of people have talked about, like, Zial is there as a mirror. She's not, and I think I'm also reacting to her this way because she's not a character. She's a lens. She's a mirror. She's a way to look at somebody else. I wish that she were also a character. as well as a reference point. Anyway, so Kevin continues, as for Worf and Alexander, their upbringing mirrors one another. Both were raised by humans. Both felt like they did not belong anywhere. Worf found Starfleet, Alexander didn't find his place. I think Mike said it when he said Alexander came there to die. I am glad he found his place in the end. Yeah, totally good point. I give this episode 91 self-sealing stem bolts. Also, Mike, I saw Terry Farrell at a convention this past weekend. She gave me a hug. I'm passing it on to you. Wrap your arms around you and squeeze. Awesome.
Totally just squeezing. I'm
Hibernation Pod.
I'm finished squeezing now.
I'm glad we were able to make that uncomfortable.
If you know anything about Mike, he can go from 0 to uncomfortable pretty fast.
Oh, we do. We're in season 6 of this.
Yeah, that's fair.
And in fact, we're in season 6 of this, and if you count Oops, this is season 14 of our nonsense.
You know, friend of the show, friend of Oops, Keith, Marla Sokolov, just got her first full-time podcasting gig over on the Full House Rewind podcast with Dave Coulier. Congratulations to a friend of the show, Marla.
Very, very cool. All right, so hibernation.
I knew she was gonna amount to something.
Yes. She took a cue from us. Hibernation Pod says, Mike's new spot feels similar to mine, but I use more red. This felt like an episode about day-to-day life with dysfunctional families. I didn't like it, but I didn't hate it either. Being within a larger opening season arc, it was the slow scene in a great movie to me. However, the amount of times I thought of Alexander's challenge to Worf when thinking about how I wish I could have dealt with the toxic and brutish behavior of the men in my family. Yeah, no, I mean, I think all of us who are sons of fathers have some version of that at some point in our lives. 55 self-sealing stem bolts YouTube viewer says, the previous 5 episodes of Deep Space Nine before this were among my all-time favorites. Sons and Daughters was okay. After so many great episodes, okay feels like crap in comparison. Okay, one complaint. In my opinion, there is a plot hole. It is a plot hole that Klingon children grow up faster than humans, since Klingons that avoid dying in battle usually manage to outlive humans with it not being unheard of for them to pass 150. Not a huge deal, but I don't like it. Yeah, I think, then, not a scientist, musical theater professional here, but I do believe on our planet, the way we evolved, the creatures that reach adulthood super fast are the shorter lived, and the ones that have a longer gestation period before adulthood tend to be longer lived. I think. Some scientists, tell me I'm wrong. Zial spent her entire adolescence as a slave to the Breen, where she only met 40 people. Zial being childishly naive makes perfect sense, since she doesn't have much life experience. Remember that in the microcosm of a slave camp she was part of, Bajorans and Cardassians were equal to each other and supported each other. Totally valid point. Good point. I wish that they had included the deleted scene, not for Ducat's character arc, but for Damar's character arc. Also a good point, although I think we do sort of establish most of that in this upcoming episode. It might have helped me care about the stakes of the episode more if we'd known what the supplies in the convoy were carrying, and who needed said supplies. Perhaps the convoy was just carrying popcorn and self-sealing stem bolts. Are you saying those aren't vitally important? My favorite scene was when Quark offered to make Jake a waiter. I like to think that Quark actually cares for Jake as a person now, and is genuinely worried about him and can't admit it. Very good. As for piecing together what happened at the end of the episode with Alexander and the technical plasma leak, whatever, this is my interpretation of the scene. Sealing a plasma leak is important but not technically difficult. Alexander did something useful but not especially heroic. I don't believe the crew was messing with him, i.e. locking him in. They're not going to prank him when the ship is in danger. I believe the implication was that by clumsiness or dumb luck, Alexander locking himself in the supply chamber was an embarrassing but not life-threatening accident. I give this episode 75 out of 100 bags of popcorn.
I hear that, but my problem is more with Dorn's performance. If that is the takeaway, it should have been more of like an end of a sitcom, "Aw, you knucklehead" reaction instead of like a "I'm proud of you, boy" type of thing.
Well, except for that was a turn by Dorn, but from Worf, because he had to, before he could get to the like, Alexander, he had to go through a place of acceptance of this is who he is. And so I think it was like, all right, I get it. This is who you are. I'm going to be proud of you no matter what.
Proud of you, boy.
Then next time it happens, he can be Alexander.
Okay.
Because we hadn't seen that transition point.
All right, buddy.
Anyway, those are my 2 cents. JD says, Mike's new space is quite moody. Just the dark void. I kind of love it.
Yeah, I'm going to have a shelf back here and some stuff. There's just no stuff yet.
It's true. He hasn't moved in anything other than his toys. JD says, once several years ago, I was watching a show on my laptop, and my big dog was laying next to it with his head on my lap. When someone came in the front door, he jumped up and ran so fast I didn't realize the cord of my headphones was around him. And I managed to grab my laptop before it hit the floor, but my $100 headphones were flung across the room and smashed to the wall and demolished. The cord was ripped in the works. I was so pissed. So now I know the feels, of your poor headphones. One should not say into space, I ripped my ass. Because I once literally did that, but I will not be telling the story because it's very cringe. Yeah, I don't know what the non-cringe story of ripping your ass is, but we've all been there. The double entendres in the first 5 minutes is too much. Seeing Mike's gears come to a halt as he tried to make that candy pun was the best thing all week. Thank you.
See, back in the old days when we first started, I would have tried to catch up, would have tried to fix it. And now we've gotten to the place of comfort with our viewers that I just quit.
No, Mike, our failures are the charm of the show.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's it. So back to Candy Corner. JD says, I don't care for plain M&Ms, but peanut and peanut butter M&Ms are great. I actually am allergic to coconut, like me. Not deadly, but if I eat it in any way, I get a rash on my face and hands.
You know why I like peanut M&Ms, Keith? I thought about it when JD wrote this. I like them because they're also a toy. I don't just eat them, right? I don't pop them. I like to bite them in half and then see if I can remove the peanut without bringing the chocolate with it. So it becomes sort of like the fidget spinner of candies for me.
It's definitely an autism thing, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is unsalted peanuts are so boring. So like I would get the peanut out perfectly, then throw it out.
I think once you've lived inside of an M&M, there's enough sugar on you.
Just life experience of the peanut.
Yeah. Like you got inside of an M&M is a very sugar-filled place. So I don't think it's just a plain peanut at that point.
I don't know. It tastes, but after having eaten the delicious chocolate, even if there is sugar in the peanut, it's still going to taste like styrofoam.
I think you're wrong on this one, buddy, but okay.
All right. Well, folks, weigh in on Keith and Mike's Candy Corner. All right. So, sorry, Keith, you're having a false memory. Not surprisingly. That conversation about Alexander finding his own path never happened on screen. In fact, after the episode Firstborn, a great deal of this story is told off-screen in the remainder episodes of Next Gen. I think you were thinking about the conversation between Worf and future Alexander. Yes, that is probably true. I guess I'm considering future Alexander and Alexander to be the same person, but I guess we're on different timelines. But yeah, I mean, my memory of that is not great. So, who knows? Guys, I think you're forgetting that Zial literally grew up in a prison camp. Yes, as YouTube viewer said. She has been severely deprived of emotional connections in her entire life, so don't judge Zial too hard. She's not over her Taylor crush. Yeah, that's also probably true. Martok is the cool-ass uncle that first let you drink beer with him. 100%. I think the Alexander writing is very much a lost teen story. I know for myself and many of my friends in our late teen years, moving on into our early 20s, was very much filled with emotional and irrational choices and not deliberate ideas. I think Alexander is doing that. He's just being an irrational teen, and I think that the ending where he doesn't die or being redeemed is fine. That's how life is. We F up and we move on. Yeah, I think you're right. I agree with everybody, because I think that is the story that is being told in subtext. But I don't think... I feel like it just needed a second draft of the writing of it just to clarify all of that. Because I think we're all having to do a lot of cleanup work to make it make more sense than what was actually on the page. And I think what everybody's doing, fixing it, is 100% right. And I think it's good, but I think it's better than actually what got on screen. Lastly, he says this one does drop a bit compared to what we've seen. We've had this season, but it's okay. It does some interesting things. 84 self-sealing stem bolts. I think we should talk about the episode. Don't you think?
I think it's time.
Okay, Behind the Lines, Deep Space Nine Season 6, Episode 4, aired on October 20th, 1997. The top song we're gonna settle in, folks. You know, sometimes you have some light and warmth, but it's hard to hold on to it because it's a little windy.
I'm sorry, what?
Candle in the wind?
Like a candle in the wind. I'm sorry that Keith had to prompt me too many times. Back in the day, I would have got that reference right away. But I've smoked too many joints.
There was no finish to the line. Oh, that feels appropriate.
Yeah.
The top movie,
or even connection to the melody of the song.
None whatsoever. Well, apropos of that, I know what you did last summer, but Mike probably doesn't. That was our top movie, classic. Classic. I can't believe that was that long ago. But
I can't believe. Yeah, we were talking about when somebody had moved to New York and they were like, oh, 2014. And I was like, oh, that was like nothing. And then I was like, oh, geez, even 2014 was a decade ago.
Yeah. Crazy. Did you see the remake of I Know What You Did Last Summer? Eric was in it.
No.
It was good. I spoiler alert. I guess. I stopped watching after Eric died. Mm-hmm. I should probably go back and finish. So I actually don't know who did it last summer in the remake. Mike, what was on TV tonight?
Nothing interesting. We should go.
All right. What was Voyager doing? Nothing interesting. They were in reruns this week. But you know what was interesting? Who directed this episode? It was, of course, Geordi himself, LeVar Burton, who last directed another Klingon episode, Soldiers of the Empire. Great episode. This was written by Renee Echevarria, who last wrote on Children of Time. I always love Renee's work. You know what everybody loves? The most. Now Keith, waste your time with trivial trivia. All right. So the hatch that Rom is waiting to open to sabotage the Dominion's plan has the label, ready for this? A51, restricted area. You know what that means? What that references?
Area 51?
Of course it does. Not only is Area 51 in real life, it's also where where Nog has already been in Little Green Men. Oh, it's all coming together. Nog presents Sisko with a bottle of Saurian brandy. This fictional libation first appeared in The Enemy Within in 1966. The distinctive curved powder horn bottle is used in both series. Was fashioned from a commemorative bottle from the George Dickel Whiskey Distillery. It's crazy to think that props from the original series were then used again in the 90s. But And I think I have a bit of a like age bias there, because when in the 90s, the concept of the 60s felt like the 1700s to me, it being 30 years ago. But now, 30 years later, it's like, oh, of course you still have stuff from the 90s. I have clothes from the 90s still.
Sheesh, I've lived in this apartment for 5 years, and moving, I'm starting to pack up, and I'm like, oh, why do I have this thing from forever ago?
Yeah. So it's not surprising that they'd still have stuff around. But like, again, when you're 16, you can't conceive of that amount of time.
You know, remember there was a time in our lives, Keith, where if we had to like move apartments, I could pack in like, I don't know, 3 hours.
Yeah.
We had that little stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of that was a function of being young, and part of that's a function of living in New York City.
Did you ever have, you must have, this is my favorite thing. I think about all of the times I moved to an apartment, into a storage unit, out of a storage unit, back into an apartment. And the biggest pain in the butt was, you'd think my guitars, this, that, no. It was I had a rolly computer chair, and I had to keep bringing that to a storage unit and then like finding a way to get it to an apartment. Did you ever have to travel with rolly computer chair?
I definitely moved it a couple of times, but I never did the storage part.
And I had a CRT television too.
That I certainly remember. In fact, I have a Star Trek connection to that. But also, I never sublet. I never sublet because like I couldn't. It breaks my brain, and maybe that's a neurodivergent thing. But I'm like, nope, not gonna happen. Like I'll keep the apartment. It's gonna be alone. No one's going in. No one's going out.
I was thinking about that one last thing when we lived in that apartment. That sort of like, it was basically in
Brooklyn,
a flop house. How many people's mail from like just subletters ago would just pile up. I'm guaranteed in that apartment right now, somewhere off Bedford in Brooklyn, there's my mail, your mail, people's mail is still going there.
No, I'm sure. For sure. Well, I mean, like this house, we obviously get the previous owner's mail sometimes. We get the previous owner's mail sometimes. Anyway, the CRT TV, right? So the Star Trek connection. Yeah, see, it's all going to come together. It's all going to come back. So, in that same apartment in Brooklyn, my first, like, larger television, and we played Madden on it many times, was an old Sony monitor. It wasn't a television. It was like a professional monitor, but it was an old tube one that was in Jim's studio before. From way back, so they edited Next Gen and Voyager on it before they switched to high def. So it had been used many times in the production of Star Trek, and so it was cool. It was a really good monitor. The problem was, because it was a professional monitor and it was a tube TV, it was like 1,000 pounds. Bajillion pounds.
Yeah.
You know, if I'd had the space, I would have kept it just as a piece of like Star Trek memorabilia, but it's moldering in the trash somewhere. Anyway, so yes, carrying that was even the big giant TVs. The 65-inch TV is lighter.
Yeah, I hung my own TV. The 65, I did it myself.
Yeah, well, I did too.
I'm just saying they're light enough to do so.
Yes, which is crazy. All right, so Bashir. Sorry guys, this is going to be a long one. So back to Trivial Trivia. Remember the segment we were doing. Bashir asks Dax to back up his story about taking the Defiant's helm in order to impress Ensign Kirby, who we never see but is referenced to. In Children of Time, which was also the last episode that Renee Echevarria wrote, it is revealed that Bashir and Kirby became a couple in the alternate timeline on the planet of Gaia. So Bashir clearly thinks he's got a shot at starting a relationship with her. Like it. The original B story of this episode was based on the 1930 Howard Hawks film The Dawn Patrol. A major theme of this movie was that of a reluctant commander being forced to send untrained troops into the field, and the moral turmoil it causes him. However, when Ira Steven Behr read Echevarria's script, he felt that it didn't work because the B story had become too important, and it felt like it should be the A story. As such, Echevarria dropped the story entirely and replaced it with a B story involving Dax. She is given the command of the USS Defiant and discovers that she loves combat. According to Echevarria, she gets into it too much and becomes Patton. Neither Bear nor Echevarria himself were happy with that story either, however. Ultimately, we reinvented it yet again, making it much smaller, quieter story where you just are asked to put yourself into Cisco's shoes and see how hard it is for him to have to sit back and send his friends into war. And that, folks, is the writer's rewrite endless conundrum that you're put into.
I did see, you do get feelers of it being a Dax story, just to see her in the command and her respond to it. I think there's enough of it there where it's also a Dax story still.
Yeah, I mean, there's an alternate version of this episode where, Dax commanding the Defiant on this crazy kamikaze attack would be a great episode too. Mm-hmm. Just not the story we're telling. And lastly, Armin Shimmerman considers this to be an important episode in the development of Quark. Concerning his speech in A Time to Stand, where he points out that the presence of the Dominion wasn't all bad, Shimmerman says, Quark is one of those deluded people who thought, this is fine, we all get to do what we want to do, and didn't realize that liberty was more important than creature comforts. But he learns, and I was appreciative of this aspect of his arc. Like an everyman character, Quark has to go through some turmoil before he realizes the truth. Very wise. Armin's a real bright guy. All right, you want to know who else is bright and learns from history and might have gone through some turmoil, Mike?
Keith, that's the people in our lives known as the patrons. Many of them have reached out this week. Many of them reach out, and every time they do, they open their hearts, and somehow, and for some reason, they open their wallets to us. Brian Kilmer, Beersock, Peter Bank, Frank Ringe, Quarks Bar, Yanba, Ryan Chesley, Andre, the Romulan Shoulder Pad Enjoyer, Joshua Cronin, Merritt Neath, Andrew Hayes, Alan, and the Mysterious Worf's Big Old Boot Shivs, Charles Babbitt, Harry Pothead, Anton Thies, Carl Fisher, Alan Gerton, Brian.
I'd like to point out, we have 2 Allens on the team.
Whew, one with last name, one without. Brian from Video Game Drive-By, CRM, Nicolay, YouTube viewer, James Hubbard, Hibernation Pod, Miri, Holcomb, Odo's Bucket, Lost, Emu, Scotty B, JD Makes, Colin Dagan, JD just continuing. We might have to make his font bigger because he keeps sending stuff in the mail.
It's crazy.
Chris Mitchell, CRM, Frank, Pat, Joshua Cronin, Kevin, Bolian, Lutz, Wyatt, Andreas, Jerome, and Zontari. By the way, those of you Zontar 1, yes, who also made a cool picture of me I'm going to show in just a second.
Yes.
Those of you who have sent us stuff in the mail, I'm going to pop back over to our 1 here real quick. Those of you who have sent us stuff in the mail, I think we have your email addresses, but in the case we don't, if you don't think I have your email address, please send it to me. Send it to us, because I finally figured out how to gift patron subscriptions. So for those of you who've sent us stuff in the mail, you should be getting the content.
Yes.
So we're going to make that happen. So send us an email and I'll make that happen.
Yes, definitely. That's cool.
Yeah, by the way, and if you just want to join as a patron, a non-paying patron, you still get to listen to the watch-alongs. So you get that. There's an incentive to sign up. And then guess what? $1 gets you everything.
Get you everything.
And we're doing something pretty soon, right, Keith?
Yeah.
Star Trek 3 or something?
Well, we need to do Star Trek 3. And we might be doing an interview. We might be, doing lots of, and we'll have to do another AMA. Gonna be lots of good stuff.
Cool.
You know who else is good stuff? Our guest stars on Behind the Line, including, of course, Jeffrey Combs as Wayum, Mark Alimo as Gul Dukat, Max Grodenchik as Rom, Aaron Eisenberg as Nog, Casey Biggs as Damar, Barry Jenner as William Ross, and Salome Jens as the female changelings. And speaking of obsequious little turds, what do we have there, Mike?
Apparently this is me, AI morphed into a
Vorta.
A Vorta?
From Zontar 1. It's really good, actually.
Yeah, it's, I guess that's why AI was invented, right there.
Hey, look, you said you wanted to dress up as a Vorta, and there we have, that is Mike, the Mike Vorta. Really cool. Someday. All right, So I'm here. Here's going to be an elaborate prank I'm going to play on Mike, but I'm going to say it out loud because he's not going to remember, which is the best part. Because Mike is not great at remembering things.
No.
If we ever go to a convention, we have to go to a convention at some point, and I'm gonna convince Mike that we're both gonna dress up in elaborate costumes. He's gonna go as
100%. Yeah, 100%.
I'm definitely not doing a costume, but I'm gonna tell Mike that I'm going to. I don't do costumes. I barely do costumes when I'm paid to do costumes.
I hate costumes, but I've already forgotten that this was a prank.
Exactly. All right, let's do it. Okay, so in our teaser, the crew of the Defiant are back at the starbase after another successful battle.
Uh-oh.
Nog forgot to turn on the lights.
They're not showing.
No, it's gonna happen though, I believe.
They're here. Let's try again.
I don't know. They're hiding.
Screens. Select. Hey!
Hey, there we go. So Nog turned on the lights and has acquired a bottle of Saurian brandy to celebrate, which is quite a feat during the war. And I thought, honestly, a Ferengi on every ship could be super, super useful, because the guy who knows how to get stuff under any circumstances, like, absolutely you should have a Ferengi on the ship, because you never know. You need that, like, weird thing, and you have to go and, like, you gotta find the guy who does the thing on the CD planet or whatever, and, like, you know, Picard's not gonna get his hands dirty. You need a Ferengi.
You know what they say, Keith? Keep your friends close. Keep your Ferengis closer.
Yeah. So
Ferengi
O'Brien
enemies?
and...
Nah, forget it.
I was trying to bail you out of that
Yeah,
just
you're
moving forward, but no, you want to sit in it. So O'Brien enters with a spent power cell from the phaser array, and Cisco does a pretty cool ceremony with it. He says, "Take a look at this, people. It says something about this ship. It says that we're willing to fight, and that we'll keep on fighting until we can't fight anymore. Yes, sir. And we don't throw something like this away. No, sir." And he places it on a long line of other cells. Really cool leadership moment here. Very cool. Like, it's not something that other ships are doing. It's just his own particular flavor of getting through the war. I like it. Admiral Ross enters wearing his spiffy new uniform. And he's got news. They figured out how the Dominion is tracking all of their ships so well. They have a giant sensor array. And so he's going to send the Defiant to go blow it up. Back on Deep Space Nine, Kira and Rom watch Damar drinking Kanar at Quark's. They're watching the fruits of a scheme they have been working on. They stole, previously, Damar's pad containing a secret memorandum he was working on concerning the shortage of white. Without the drug, the Jem'Hadar will run amok, killing everyone and everything in their path if the Cardassians can't bring down the minefield and reopen the supply line from the Gamma Quadrant. They're planning to poison the last ration of white and eliminate the Jem'Hadar before it's too late. Diabolical, but in no way surprising.
Yeah, what I really kind of thought was cool too was it's just kind of an interesting flex of a storytelling device here. Instead of just showing the scene, right, we have them sort of exposition narrating it as sort of like a radio play almost. I thought it was cool. I thought it was unique
and clever. And I think that their plans, their little resistance plans, well, not necessarily going to change the quadrants, the whole world there, but I think it's useful to sow dissension among the ranks.
Yes, but it does bring up for me a potential slight teeny itsy bitsy.
Oh, do tell.
So we're going to see 3, if I'm not mistaken, ish meetings of various members of our resistance cell. Now, what we also learn in this, and makes sense. I didn't even think about this, but it makes sense once we learn in this episode that because the founders have an alliance with the Cardassians, or I guess a non-aggression, and here we are on this Cardassian station, there should be, could be, and probably will be founders and changelings abound.
Right.
We've seen Odo turn into lots of stuff. You could turn into a spoon, a canister, a table. Maybe our meetings and our just like talking about our plans out loud in dialogue form should be maybe hidden a little better, or at least we should take some care in the dissemination of all of our plans and who's responsible for them. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, although perhaps off screen, because we spent a lot of time with like founders detectors and phaser sweeps and that kind of stuff. We don't know that they're not doing that in the room before they go. Plus Odo's there, and Odo's ability to detect who's goo and what's a spoon might also be useful. But it's a fair point.
Yeah, well, why are we talking about 30 minutes about how far I can throw my trust for Odo? All right?
Well, yeah, we'll get into that for sure. Anyway, so Rom had previously stolen the pad and given it to the Jem'Hadar, who comes in to confront Damar. This, of course, starts a big brawl, and that's the end of our teaser. In Act 1, we continue the scene with Dukat and Weyoun surveying the damage from the fight. There are multiple dead, and they each chew out their subordinates. Then they start bickering amongst each other, but also, like, great Weyouning here. Weyoun forces them to smile for the crowd. Odo enters and looks annoyed. Back to the starbase. Sisko lays out his plan to attack the array. It's risky, but of course, it's the Defiant. You know they got a plan for that. Then, back on Deep Space Nine, Odo is pissed at Kira. He had argued against Kira's plan in the Resistance meeting and is annoyed that she did it anyway. And he says, there are limits to what we can do. And Kira says, I'm beginning to think you shouldn't have agreed to sit on the council. It's as if you've gotten so invested in making sure the station runs smoothly that you've forgotten there's a war going on, which has been sort of the continuing struggle with both of them, honestly, throughout this season, of trying to navigate resistance versus do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's like, because you want to do harm to the enemy without doing harm to your people, and I think in an occupied territory, that's a difficult thing to navigate, and they both have kind of been on both sides of it a couple of times so far this season.
Well, and I think it dovetails well with, they are still seeking out the new balance and leverage of their relationship and friendship, right?
Yes.
I think that, let me say this right. When she was friend zoning him and was unaware of such, you know,
right,
there's an argument to be made that you're never completely unaware and that you just, I'm not saying she was power playing him, but I think the dynamics were definitely different at that point. And then once it became clear, everything, and they decided to sort of just ignore it, the balance has been thrown off, and they're still fighting for that, jockeying for that position, I think.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting, because the power dynamics at this point are incredibly complex.
Mm-hmm.
Both between the two of them during the occupation. You know, Kira has some position of power as the speaking for the Bajoran people, but also no power. Odo, the same thing. Mm-hmm. Odo is sort of under the Cardassian rule, but also he's a god to the person who's ruling the Cardassians.
Yeah, and don't forget, she was like, you should definitely go get on that council. You should take advantage of Weyoun's worship of you. And then the second he did, she's like, I don't know, because then he sort of held a seat above her. And I think that was interesting. Here, at least this early in the episode, it was hard for me, and I don't think she was doing so intentionally, by the way, but it was hard for me not to empathize with Odo and think that he was somewhat being infantilized. Like, don't tell me how to do what I'm doing. You either trust me or you don't, right? Like, I'm a big boy.
Yes, and at the same time, like, she's got to be aware of his predilection for order.
Mm-hmm.
Going in because being a resistance form, you're basically doing guerrilla tactics. And what is guerrilla tactics if not creating disorder? Right? Creating chaos.
She's also very good at this, right? Like this ain't her first resistance rodeo.
And so he's naturally being pulled out of his comfort zone. He wants the trains to run on time. If you're doing a resistance, you want to disrupt the trains. And so it's his divided loyalties are going to be sort of the whole episode here. So Odo thinks she's questioning his loyalty, which she kind of is, sort of. And then in walks, the female changeling. And in Act 2, she immediately dismisses Kira, but notices that Odo calls her Nerys. And so Odo says, "You're a long way from home, here to keep an eye on the war effort. I'm content to leave the details of the war to the Vorta." We don't know if she's telling the truth there, but it's interesting to think that she's not directly involved in the war plans. Or at least says she isn't.
Keith have a broad wormhole, and I think I understand it from a production standpoint, but I'm just going to throw it out there because sometimes I feel like recently we've been lax with the wormholes, so I'm throwing the darts when I see them. I understand why Odo looks like Odo. He expressed early on that he had trouble. He had trouble
get to it. Yep.
Replicating the human form. So why does every other changeling take the exact same Odo form? Clearly, it's for the dumb viewer, so we all know who the founders are. But like, A, my guess is she's probably better at it and could probably do a damn good human. Or B, why wouldn't they take other forms or various forms? Did they choose as a species that they were going to only take the Odo form? Because it was clear that this form, it was Odo's attempt at humans, not the rest of them. That's my wormhole.
All right, it's totally fair, and I think you're right. I think the real answer is so that we can know who they are. I think in canon, I have a couple of different theories that I'll throw out, or hypotheses, I guess. First one is they're trying to make Odo comfortable, right? They say like, "Oh, this is what you're gonna do. We're gonna sort of meet you where you are, because we can be anything. So we might as well just sort of meet you where you are and look like you." That's option number one. Option number two, this is their natural form. And Odo's attempt at being human, he just sort of defaults to his natural form as close as he can get, right? But can't really go past this. But this is sort of the natural at rest, solid form for the shapeshifters.
Okay.
So I think it could be either one of those.
Another kind of founder's question I have then that I'll just pitch now. So they have gone above and beyond. They've made a Herculean effort to bring Odo back into the fold. Yes.
Right.
Which makes sense because of sort of where he sits at the nexus of their sort of grand scheme. So he is behind enemy lines or behind the lines. So it makes sense that they would have this outreach towards him from the beginning.
Right.
Get that. But also, and I don't know because I don't know the ending, it would be cool if, because they said they sent out a lot of these probe guys, right? And it stands to reason just because of, math and ratios that not all of them have made it back. It'd be interesting if they've had this sort of a reconnaissance mission for each one of those, and think about if you could have a whole TV series about or a comic series about each of the sort of reconnaissance missions to go fetch the rogue probes.
Yeah.
Rogue probe is a hard thing to say, but that's what the comic could be called.
Yeah.
Rogue proto. Okay,
no,
sorry.
That's already too hard to say.
I've apologized. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is interesting to wonder about the other ones out there, because we saw one of them,
right?
When we
that
saw
got
this
zappity
baby
zipped.
that got zappity zipped and gave Odo his gooing back. But that's the only one we've seen so far. Interesting.
Yeah.
So Odo says, "What brings you to Deep Space Nine?" She says, "You. I was trapped here in the Alpha Quadrant when Captain Sisko mined the entrance to the wormhole. I've spent too much time among solids. I came because I felt the need to be with one of my own. Interesting that she's trapped here. And the other part, who knows if she's telling the truth. And Odo says, that's ironic considering what happened the last time we crossed paths. You caused the death of a fellow changeling, Odo. Turning you into a solid was the only punishment severe enough for your crime. We've forgiven you. And Odo says, I haven't forgiven you. Good point. It's time to put the past behind us. What about the present? You're waging war against my home. No, this isn't your home, Odo. You belong among your own kind as part of the Great Link. Now, I think the stage directions here are useful. And it says, though he tries to hide it, Odo has a burning curiosity about his people. Satisfied that she's planted the seed of temptation, she turns and exits, leaving Odo with a lot to think about. So her manipulation of him is intentional, and says so in the stage directions. It's interesting. So back on the starbase, Admiral Ross has news for Sisko. He's promoting Sisko to be his right-hand man and preventing him from continuing as captain of the Defiant. Ross is putting Dax in charge. Ben agrees, but he's not exactly thrilled. I do think this is a good opportunity to point out, I love the new sets they've built here on the space station, which are distinct and different, right? And they're much sort of brighter. They're not the dark grays of Deep Space Nine. They're also not the sort of the tans of Next Gen. They have their own flavor and look to it, which I think is really cool. And obviously the visuals of the space station exteriors, it looks so cool because it's a real model. But I think visually it's great to have this new location to hang out on. I like it. So back on the station, Dukat, Odo, and Weyoun finish a meeting, regular meeting, when the female changeling enters. Weyoun swoons, and Dukat starts speechifying. She has no time for either of it, and she only wants to know about the minefield. Dukat and Weyoun preen and bicker, jockeying for the approval of the changeling, then leave her and Odo alone. It's cool to see how they each are both obsequious, but do it in different ways.
And sort of, it's the first kind. It plants the seed that we come back to at the end, right? That we bookend with, that either they are or they see themselves, the founders that is, as so far above all of this, right?
Yeah.
As far as their intellect, their being, what's important, their priorities, that she just dismisses them, and she sees them as sort of like a almost comedic fodder, except for the shit she needs done, right? So when she
I mean, and I think that's true all throughout. They see anybody who's not a changeling as a bug,
which is interesting because, you know, and this is clearly intentional in some ways. When we see the Bajoran gods, prophets, power beings, however you want to look at it, they never behave that way so much. They're always trying to communicate with us, trying to make sense of something, trying to pass on a message. It's rare that they are looking down their nose.
Well, absolutely. And I think that the distinction is the founders see everyone as less than. They are less than they are, whereas the prophets see them as different than. And I think that is the defining difference between the two sort of powerful species. So she then follows Odo back to his quarters. And she says, your arrival was a time of great joy for the Link, and your departure was a time of great sadness. If only you had stayed with us, Odo. I couldn't. You chose the solids, and I haven't regretted it. Not even a little? And Odo says, I do think of the Link from time to time. It's there for you. I can't. Why? Because of Kira? You still have feelings for her, don't you? She doesn't share them. I'm sorry. And Odo says something which I think is very telling, and I think just good writing here. I'm so vulnerable to her. All she has to do is smile at me, and I'm happy beyond reason. A minor disagreement between us, and I'm devastated. It's absurd. Sometimes I wish I could reach inside myself and tear out my feelings for her, but I can't. And I think pretty much everybody will understand that feeling at some point in their lives.
Yeah, it's the great paradox of human emotions, right? They're at once our greatest trait, the thing that sets us apart in many ways, and also the most infuriating weakness, because there you can very well practically know factually how you should respond, how you should behave in a certain moment, and yet be completely derailed and unable to do so because of emotion.
Well, our connections to other people, in most cases, are our greatest strengths and our greatest vulnerabilities. And, it is the power of that connection that is, all of those things.
It's
cool.
I've always found it interesting because that is clearly, that was an evolved trait, right? Because I doubt when we were at our most simple forms, we're having emotion, right? The cells don't. Yeah.
No, we definitely are. Well, you mean from the pile of goo.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was clearly a survival. It shakes out, Whereas I don't know how, because we talk about evolution for the founders later, and it's hard still to see. They don't seem to share his emotional quotient, unless it's all manip.
I think they do. It's just within their shared consciousness. I just don't think it's like for us, right? We have all of these complex emotions within ourselves and with other humans, but we also have those emotions about our pets, about fictional characters on this show, about all these things. We are able to sort of put those emotions outside of ourselves and outside of our own species. And it seems like for the founders, they just can't connect on an emotional level with anyone that isn't of their own kind.
Yeah.
Which sort of makes their behavior kind of sociopathic. It's like there's sociopaths going around the country, around the universe, because they can't see other things as having consciousness and their own feelings.
Yeah, they're at their highest form. Their most effective experience when they're Voltroned.
Yeah, well, and I think they lack empathy, which they kind of are sociopaths. They care very much about their own feelings and themselves. They can feel sorry for themselves, they can feel anger, but they can't empathize with another creature outside of themselves. And they see themselves as one unit, not as a... So they're like, they're intergalactic sociopaths. Or galactic sociopaths, whatever. Interesting. Anyway, she does say poor Odo. He says, I don't want your pity. I'm not offering pity. What I need is some peace. What you need is clarity, she says. I can give you that. And with that, they goo. And we're all like, no! In Act 3, Kira arrives in Odo's office and is surprised to see that Damar is there instead of Odo. He says Odo is hanging out with the female shapeshifter. And he says, jealous, Major? Interesting. She goes straight to Odo's quarters, and Odo says the female changeling is gone. And Kira asks what she wanted. You didn't link with her, did you? Actually, I did. You did? What were you thinking? She didn't find out about the resistance, if that's why you're worried. It's not. The link isn't about exchanging information, it's about merging thought and form, idea and sensation. Sounds like the perfect way to manipulate someone. She's not manipulating me. Ever since the day you crossed paths, she's lied to you, tricked you, sat in judgment of you. I don't understand, and I don't understand how you can. Odo says, who knows? By linking with her, I might be able to make her understand that the Federation doesn't pose a threat to her people. You really think you can convince her to call off the war? If you could experience the link, you'd understand the effect it has on my people. You'd realize that anything is possible. I'm only beginning to understand it myself. I still have so many questions. Now that she's here, I finally have a chance to get some answers. And Kira says, Odo, this isn't the time for you to go off on some personal quest. There's too much at stake. After the war is over, do whatever you need to. If you want to leave and join the Great Link, I won't stop you. But right now, I need you here, focused. Promise me you won't link with her again. Odo, not until this is over. So tons of subtext in that whole conversation there. And it is interesting that the writers of this, and Ira Stephen Bear, now realize and admit how sexual this is. But that wasn't the intent. They were not intending it, the gooing, to be a stand-in for sex, when very clearly it is.
Oh, I didn't actually read that at all.
Really?
No. Because I still see her very maternal towards him. And so I guess my brain didn't go there. It didn't go Oedipal. For me, it was more his need to... Here's how I read it, interestingly. Not read it. Why I found it kind of fascinating and awesome as a character study. We've seen Odo exhibit hubris before, earlier in the series. But that was based in vulnerability as a defense mechanism, right? He hid behind his superiority or his intellect or his whatever.
Detachment.
And that was... So he sort of feigned hubris to get out of connecting, vulnerability. Now, once he's seen what that kind of connecting and what vulnerability and what being in a pack, or he wants more of it. And here, his hubris is from a point of, I want my cake and I want to eat it too. I want both. I want to be on the inside with Kira and those people and being part of my head, but I also want this, and I can do it. It's very it's very teen, right? It's very 19 through 25 when you're like, I can do everything I want and have the stuff I want, and if I leave a couple of people upset, so be it.
It's interesting because I see it also as very adolescent, but to me it reads very sexual, right? It's like you're having your first sexual relationship and you realize you're so overwhelmed by this thing, this type of intimacy, this sensation, that you're like, nothing else matters. I'm not going to call my friend back. I'm not going to do whatever. And that the person giving this to you, you'll do anything, say anything.
Yep.
That you are very easily manipulated by this new experience.
It's very much like that episode where Jake is getting brain gooed, if you will.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and refresh you again, buddy.
What's going on?
Yeah, it's just one of those days, man. Internet's interneting.
Yeah.
So regardless of how sexual you want to interpret it or whatnot, I think using the term intimacy, right, is correct, because yes, it was a little more, in my opinion, sexually overt in the Jake episode. Here, I didn't read it, I guess, because of just how I keep seeing her as a mom. But you're not wrong. But I think you're right, that that deep intimacy where you're completely exposed, completely vulnerable, and you were afraid of that, and then you realize that actually it's everything.
Well, and
or you don't understand, when people are, take the sex out of it, right? Your first sort of in love, high school in love feeling.
Right.
And you have people who are older than you and wiser than you and have had life experience tell you, hey, you're going to get hurt. You shouldn't be with this person, or, be careful or whatnot. And you're like, I don't want to hear it. You can't possibly understand how I feel about this person. And they're like, okay.
And look, not to get too dark with it, right? But I think that you could interpret what's happening here as using that feeling, right? Whether it's sex, whether it's infatuation, her using this giant power imbalance and that tool to manipulate, which is why, why we have laws and rules about ages and that type of a thing, because when you have this gigantic power imbalance and you're able to manipulate using this thing this other person hasn't experienced before, and it's very overwhelming and it's too much, and you're able to brainwash and manipulate. It's part of the true darkness of that type of manipulation.
Well, I'll save it here because I think I totally get your point, but for Mike now, just I totally read it just like you did, as though I find it interesting that Odo clearly knows. He's only been in the link twice now, 3 times, a handful of times.
Right.
So it's weird to me how confidently he's saying, "Oh, she didn't read my mind. Oh, I didn't exchange."
Right.
How confidently he thinks he knows how it works.
Right.
But to me, as a viewer who's just watching in real time, remember, I don't know at this point whether she has brainwashed him or if he's just choosing to be, it could very well be if you're a person who's been kind of an agnostic your whole life, and you have a near-death experience and you go through the pearly gates and you see the other side and all of a sudden everything changes in that moment for you. It could still be that, right? So I don't really know the machinations of what his beat shift at the end here. So I don't want to get too deep into this conversation, whereas I could maybe interpret how it pans out.
Yeah, okay, well, fair enough. But it's fascinating. And for me, I remember the first time I saw this, so deeply uncomfortable. It felt so wrong. And we're going to see it, obviously, the consequences. So anyway, he agrees not to go with her again. Meanwhile, on the Defiant, Captain Dax prepares to leave. O'Brien explains the naval tradition of calling anyone in command the captain.
Captain Dax will get you by tonight.
Ooh, good Billy Joel pull. Nog says, "You mean if I take command, I'd be called captain too?" And O'Brien says, "Cadet, by the time you took command, there wouldn't be anyone left to call you anything." Hilarious.
Sick burn.
Oh, and here you can see the set I'm talking about. Like, completely different vibe. Great looking set. Love it.
Rolly chairs. I hope you got a storage container.
Rolly chair, yeah. And a great shot of the Defiant pulling away. So Cisco reluctantly sees them off, then watches from his new office window as they fly away. Back in Quark's, Damar comes in and sits down and orders a fancy glass of Kanar. He's celebrating. He has been promoted to Gull. That's a big deal. Quark immediately starts fishing for Y, plying him with glass after glass, joining him in drinking. Damar is quite proud of himself. But we don't know why.
I couldn't possibly say.
Couldn't possibly.
Don't make me sing.
Then later, Quark arrives at the Resistance meeting, smashed. But he's figured out what Damar is excited about, and it is bad news. Quark says, "I've tried my best to run my establishment under this occupation, but you know what? It's no fun. I don't like Cardassians. They're mean and arrogant, and I can't stand the Jem'Hadar. They're creepy. They just stand there like statues staring at you. I've had it. I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing business with these people. I want the Federation back. I want to sell root beer again." And he announces Damar has figured out a way to get rid of the minefield. Uh-oh. But I think it's an important moment for Quark here, as Armin Shimmerman shed, as he said, this is Quark's eyes opening beyond his own self-interest a little bit. Now, of course, he's still talking about it through the lens of his own self-interest, like the Cardassians are annoying and the Jem'Hadar are creepy, but I think subtextually,
also that this position where things ain't so bad was a purgatory, right? Was a purgatory that only existed within the space created by said minefield. So if that goes away and the ships all come and things progress, we lose our sort of calm before the storm.
Yeah, that's right. Minefield goes down, it might get a little dicey.
Yeah. Let's just say, yeah, you know what? Right now, it's hypothetical. Everything we're learning about maybe a potential cabinet. Yeah, maybe they won't confirm how so and so. Oh, it's up.
They're not actually gonna do it.
Come January, it's a different conversation, right? The feelings are a little different.
The number of people surprised by what's happening, despite the fact that that's exactly what they've said is going to happen.
They're not coming for my neighbor changes when you hear the knock on the door next door, right?
Yeah, they're not actually going to do it, right? Anyway, so in Act 4, they start trying to help Quark remember how Damar is going to get rid of the minefield. He's going to use the deflector array to technobabble, but it's going to work. Rom realizes he needs to disable the deflector, and he, Kira, and Odo hatch a plan to break it. But they need Odo to turn off the alarms.
Yeah, why doesn't Odo just like goo up there as like a hummingbird and just turn it off like that?
Because I think the alarms would detect that too. It's like a motion detector. Okay. Whatever shape you are, it's still going to detect you. So they're going to do it tomorrow at 8. They're nervous and upset because
this guy never met.
This is good. Tomorrow morning at 8.
At 8?
The show's bad. I tried to watch that on Plex. Not good. So on the starbase, Worf checks. Yeah, it's not great. Anyway, so on the starbase, Worf checks.
Keith, welcome to all of musical theater pre 1970.
20? Yeah, right. The Defiant has been gone for 16 hours, and they're both nervous about the mission.
I got a quick aside. When I saw Jen, when we first started dating, the first thing I saw her in was My Fair Lady. I literally at my table, it has nothing to do with my wife's performance, but literally at my table during one of the scenes, I was like, oh, come on. It's just so,
Was this dinner? Was this up?
Yeah, Westchester, Broadway.
Westchester. I saw.
She's such a powerful woman.
Phantom there once.
Yeah.
Anyway, beef and boards.
At least the patriarchy's dead, right?
Oh yeah, no, we solved it.
Yeah, at least half the country wasn't like women.
Exactly. Anyway, the Defiant has been gone for 16 hours, and they're both nervous about the mission. Ross enters and tells Sisko he needs to focus on more than just the Defiant. They're now responsible for a whole tactical wing, not just one ship. Meanwhile, on Deep Space Nine, Odo and the female shapeshifter are chatting in his quarters. Odo is peppering her with questions about their people. When we learn a couple of important things we didn't know before. Apparently, they evolved from a solid species.
It's cool.
And Odo asks how many of them there are. And she says, "Link with me, and it will all be clear." Odo tries to keep his promise and demurs. They discuss the nature of individuality within the link. She has no name, because she doesn't need one. She's all part of the whole. A drop becomes the ocean, and the ocean becomes a drop. But she keeps pushing for him to link. She's a little link slutty. But we do not goo slut shame here on the Out of Practice podcast.
Yeah, but you know what, Keith?
Out of Practice podcast. You say that. Yes.
I want to say this.
Let's hear it.
There is a saying, bros before something, and I would never say that on this podcast because it's misogynistic and I won't say it. And it doesn't even apply here. But I will say, can we coin #crew before goo?
Yes. Crew before goo, folks. Crew before goo.
I mean, I empathize with a lot of what he's going through here, but you don't screw with your crew, all right? Especially if you got a secret club.
Yeah. 100%.
But
she's all horny.
You don't meet with your new girlfriend during band practice, all right? I'm talking to you, Doug.
But you know, look, those of us who have made out in the band storage room.
Yeah.
It's the thing. It's hard not to. But that's why, anyway, obviously. Meanwhile, Rom and Kira get ready to sabotage the array, and they expect Odo to be in his office to disable the alarms.
Ugh.
Rom heads off into the Jeffries tube, and Kira goes to Odo's office only to find he's not there.
Clearly I knew what was coming, and I'm going to tell you, Keith, clearly I knew what was coming. And yet I held out hope to the last second. And when I found out, when the reveal happens, it pissed me off. Viscerally angry.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
Good episode.
Me too. Like, I remember just being... you know what? I think what I felt... I felt betrayed.
This is it, right? This is it.
I was so betrayed by what happens here. So
I'll never forget, man. I'm going to bring it up. We've all buried the hatchet. We're all good now. So, but I was in this band. I started a band in high school, and it's our senior year, and everybody was being kind of cagey. It was weird, and I just happened to see a flyer for a show posted on a window, and I was like, "Oh, that's my band." I didn't know there was a gig, and it didn't even tell me, man. They just replaced me and had a show with the other dude. It was so effed up. This is the feeling of the empty chair, showing up and it's just like your stuff is gone.
I mean, you might be over it. I'm still mad on your behalf.
Yeah.
But yeah. So she goes to his office only to find he's not there. Kira calls him and he doesn't answer because he's goo banging the changeling. In Act 5, it all falls apart. Rom opens the hatch and the alarm is set off.
And I love that it's Rom, right? They could have Kira get caught, Rom. Which would have been, but they know it's Rom because he's the innocent. He's the innocent. He's the stand-in for innocence.
Damar sends security to chase him and catch him before he even gets out of the Jeffries tube. Back on the starbase, the Defiant has returned triumphant. Ross and Cisco can go to congratulate the crew and watch Dax do the spent phaser battery ceremony. It's eating Cisco not to be in command of his crew. But you want to know who else is being eaten? Kira goes to confront Odo, and she is pissed. And so justifiably so, but Nana does such a great job. She almost breaks the props.
Yeah, I wonder if that was direction or if that was like a choice, because it's an awesome choice.
Oh my god. It's like, if she hit it any harder, like all of the plywood would have splintered. Great. She says, "What the hell happened? Why didn't you disable the alarm?" Odo says, "It's difficult to explain." Rom is sitting in a holding cell being interrogated. He was counting on you. I was counting on you. I know. You know? Do you realize you handed the Alpha Quadrant to the Dominion? I was in the link. Are you telling me you forgot? I didn't forget. It just didn't seem to matter. A lot of people are going to die. Don't you care? There's nothing to do with me. How can you say that? If you could experience the link, you'd know why nothing else matters. See, it's sex, I'm telling you. The last 5 years, your life here, our friendship, none of that matters? It did. Once. I wish I could make you understand, but you can't. You're not a changeling. That's right. I'm a solid. See, again, harping on the sex analogy. This is the first time you touch a boob and your buddy wants to talk about G.I. Joes. You're like, G.I. Joes don't matter anymore.
Okay. Yes. I still don't see it as the best analogy. It's apt. For me, the one that works here is, I'm going to give you a very specific example.
All right.
The girl we both know, Keith, who dicked me down pretty good.
Oh, okay, right. I was going to say, like, our chancellor?
No, I mean just like a weird type of breakup. But regardless, one time I ran into her post the breakup one time, and I tried to express my questions, my feelings, my disappointment, my everything in sort of like human emotion terms, and she I was met with complete apathy. And that is in a very that is like a life thing that is difficult to like
wrestle with
to make
to
work,
square the circle
right?
there.
That you're like, we shared all of this stuff, and this is a different person I'm talking to now. Like, you don't,
right.
and not only that, but like, you've bricked walled me even being able to express my feelings. You're not even accepting that which is now bouncing back and giving me more stuff.
Right.
So that's what I'm feeling here. It's like that jilted lover that you can't ever get the closure from.
Totally. Totally. It's immensely frustrating.
Yeah.
It's immensely angering.
So there's a part of me, and this is the cool thing about emotions, is like that wants to believe that Odo has been, you know how we gave Garrick a pass because he sniffed the mist, so he was okay to murder a couple people. That's cool.
Totally sniffed the mist.
Yeah. So, but here I'm like, I hope that it turns out that the goo is kind of like has been tainted with something, and that he's been like brainwashed, because to believe that he just chose to blow them off, I don't know that I could forgive him, man. And we got a whole season and a half to go. 2 seasons.
Yeah, this is gonna be a lot to unpack.
I actually thought to myself, I'm glad I didn't get the Odo X06.
You're so mad.
I'm so mad right now.
But that's it. That means it's effective.
Yeah, dude, for sure.
It means it's working. So Kira storms out and we reveal that the female changeling has been listening the whole time. And she says, "You look troubled, Odo. Did she upset you?" "No, not really."
Oh,
credits.
Oof, man, damn.
Yeah, well, that's it. This feels like this might be a bit of a to be continued, but
I thought for sure they were going to the to be continued, but
no, that's not how Deep Space Nine does stuff anymore. All right, we don't change. We would never betray you. We're still gonna make you listen to us talk about the episode.
Nailed it.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, we're so good at this. Okay. Lots to feel.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot to discuss because we're sort of in the middle of the story here.
Yeah.
But let's talk about your best moment.
Yeah, this episode has a lot of great moments. There's, some great honorable mentions. I think Dax kind of being an awesome captain is a great moment. They have that one scene. I think the comedic scene with Kira and Max is really good because it's in the midst of such a heavy episode. It's a good comedic relief. They slapstick off each other really well, so that's worth a head. But for me, 2 stick with me. 2 moments. The moment where you're waiting for, because they set the table like, oh, Quark's gonna goo with this lady and he's gonna miss the thing. So in your head you're like, okay,
how are we going to avert this?
How are we going to avert that? And she's going to open the door and there's going to last minute Odo does Odo, right? But then they open the door and you see the empty chair. I'm so glad we got that screenshot. Because that empty chair is like, it's a visual slap in the face where you're like,
yeah.
Oh my God, it happened.
It
right?
hurts.
It's like waking up that Tuesday morning if you're a certain sect of people. It's like, so that is a moment that will stick with me because that was like oh crap. And then that confrontation moment, because that's my other best moment, because it captures both sides of it so well. Kira's fury, I think, is something we can all relate to, and she's so good in that scene. She's so good whenever she's put to the task.
She speaks for all of us in that moment.
But also, her face. There's a great screenshot in there of it, just of the complete, the inability to comprehend that he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
And that sort of betrayal, the betrayal of it is so good in that scene. It's and the fact that this character, I absolutely have grown to love them. I all of a sudden hate for a moment. I'm just like, I hate this guy.
Yeah.
But I understand, like I've lived enough life to know kind of where he's coming from. So it's all the stuff. It's all the emotions. It's great. Best.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, I think Kira's fury at the end is so visceral And no, it's so great. And like a lot of people can do shouting Fury, but she does Fury in a. It felt like it was real. It really did. I mean, that's your job as an actor, of course. I'll just say, for the sake of being different, I really find the little ceremony that Cisco does with the spent power cell to be very. It has a very epic feel to it. It sort of makes the general story feel huge, because we see like there's a whole line of there's all these battles happening we're not even seeing. This has happened so much that like they have a ritual now. They have they've lived this whole like war experience and
world building,
exactly. It feels, you know how like on a set, right, on theatrical set, you have to build the room and then you have to build like just the edge of the next room. And if you do that, it makes it feel so much bigger because your brain invents the rest of the room. And I think these power cells lets our brain invent the rest of the war that's happening.
Really well said.
Just that little piece of it. And I think that's very satisfying.
Also, like little bits of that world building, like you said, that little side, very short scene where Cisco's talking to Worf, right?
Yeah.
It's reminding you how many levels of chess we're playing, right? We've got, think about this. There's a television show where our main cast is separated amongst 4 different locations, right?
They're splintered everywhere. Yeah.
It's really great. And like you said, it builds the scale of the whole thing.
Very cool. Let's hand out some stem bolts.
You get some stem bolts. Hell yeah, they are self-sealing. Here are some stem bolts for you.
Yeah, listen, it knocks out of the park, I think, its central thing, right? It's a huge the story of how important the Resistance is, right? So the betrayal is at the same time very huge, because Odo being potentially compromised is humongous for everything, but also it's really personal.
Right.
Extremely personal, to the point where I have visceral emotions, right? So it's achieving both the small scale and the large scale at the same time.
And I think the power source of that big visceral emotion that we are having about it is more about Nog and Kira than it is allowing them to take down the minefield, which will destroy the entire quadrant.
Yeah, right. The particulars, I kind of, until you reminded me, wasn't even thinking about. Additionally, I just think it's everyone in the cast operating at the top of their game, at least in the A story. I just love it. And on top of that, having a potential heel turn of this magnitude is ballsy, right? My biggest hope is that they don't just retcon it and make it, like he sniffed the mist or whatever. I hope that there are consequences, and that it plays into the larger arc, right? That we don't just like take it away next week.
Which is interesting, because again, putting myself in the standpoint of somebody who hasn't seen all the rest of it, part of me is like, yes, with you, let's put this out, but my little heart is like, no, fix it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that way too. I mean, I just can't imagine he's gonna be a bad guy the rest of the time, but let there be, I don't know, the show is so good at not making it this or that and having it be a little column A, little column B, that I'm hoping that they have the balls to go through with that. So I don't know what else to say other than it's hard to adjudicate at this level the production, like the elements that we usually kind of try to put into the mix here. I just feel so strongly that it's hard not to say, if something can make me feel like that, I can forgive so much of the bad, or if there's any, or I'm not looking with a big magnifying glass, because it's because there are some stuff. There's the particulars of the plot and the why and the bridge, and we got to get through the force fields and the thing. The technobabble of it. It tracks, but yeah. I could care less about it. And hearing you talk during Trivia about the B story, explains why it feels the way it feels. It feels watered down and almost insignificant outside of the world building, right? It feels like it wanted to be a character thing about Cisco, but I'm not really pulling that in. It feels like it wants to give a little more character to that Admiral. It's not really achieving that. It feels like it could be a story moment for Dax. It doesn't really do that either.
It feels like this was what they came up with because they couldn't make anything work and they didn't have the time to like really thread all the pieces together.
And unfortunately, because the A story is so good, and every time the B story came on, I'm like, come on, just get through it because I want to get back to that. It makes it feel like filler. Even though I think there is some meaty stuff there and stuff that is good in the tapestry of the show, but all of that pales to the feeling at the end where it just nails it. And even though it's not a cliffhanger, it feels like a cliffhanger because let me tell you, the urge to just watch next week is strong.
Oh God, yeah.
So yeah, I love it. I think we're back into the A pluses. I'm gonna go 94 self-sealing stem bolts for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said most of what I'm going to say. The thing I'll add to it that we haven't talked about is the suspense of what Rom is doing. The suspense of the sabotage of like I thought they did that really effectively. And the sort of ticking clock and watching Kira have to get rid of Damar in the room so that she can warn, all of that. I found the suspense building of that very effective. And I think because we're so wrapped up in Odo's betrayal, we sort of like forget how effective that was. And I was nervous. I'm nervous for Rom. And it's and I try to like forget what's going to happen and what's coming. And because of knowing we were going to do this show, I haven't rewatched this in years. Because I knew I wanted to come in as fresh as I could. So I didn't exactly remember where one episode starts and another ends or whatever. And so I was surprised at the end of this. I'm like, wait, that's it? And I was like, you're going to finish on that? And so I think that as a result, so much of this was very effective, if infuriating. And so it's not that satisfying, like, yeah, it was like but it still elicited that emotion.
I failed to even bring up in my sort of summation too. We also had the huge ball drop of learning that potentially the minefield is no longer a diversion.
Oh yeah.
So that's like,
Gulp.
oh yeah.
Yeah, like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And what is that gonna do? Yeah, so, there's a lot more to come. Spoiler alert. So, I'm going to give it 90 self-sealing stem bolts. Next week, we are doing Favor the Bold. Yeah,
So we're almost at the end of this arc, quote unquote.
we're almost at the end of this arc. Yeah. So, hold on to your bucket. I might need to join you for these two. So we'll see if I can drop in on the watch-alongs. IMDb in the real world gave this a 7.8, which made it episode 51 out of 173 of Deep Space Nine. So next week, Favor the Bold. Folks, tell us what you thought of all of this. You always do. I don't need to tell you. But we very much appreciate your views. And if you don't regularly weigh in, hop on.
Yeah, it's
even
fun
if we
when
don't read
we get
everything,
new voices.
even if we don't read everything on the show, we definitely read everything and react. And it's really great to hear from everybody who is watching and or listening to this. All right. We will see you back here next week with Favor the Bold. Till then, this has been Keith and Mike. Watch Deep Space Nine. Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/KNM.
Back in the old days, when we first started, I would have tried to catch up, would have tried to fix it. And now we've gotten to the place of comfort with our viewers that I just quit.
No, Mike, our failures are the charm of the show.
Oh, yeah, that's right.